All right. Hello and welcome to Fridays with Goodman. This is going to be episode 8 already. This is on maximum evolution that occurs at the border of support and challenge, or chaos and order. I've heard it in many ways. How are you doing today, Dr. Goodman?
I am maximally supported and maximally challenged.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Going into this, this was just something you used to reiterate to me as well a lot. In maximum evolution occurs at the border of chaos and order. I want to do one by what John Demartini, a mentor of yours, how he put it, and then we'll go into our dialogue here. And he put that maximum growth occurs at the border of support and challenge. Distress occurs when challenge far exceeds support. Life becomes boring when support far exceeds challenge. Every evening, it is wise to ask how whatever happened that day served your highest values and mission for life and helped you fulfill what is most important to you. If bored, look for the hidden challenges. If burned out, look for the hidden support. I'm sure you know so much more about this and heard it over and over. What's your take on that and learning from that maximum evolution?
Well, the one thing I would start with saying to everybody watching this is 2020 has certainly been, for no one watching this, it has not been boring. You would have to agree that when you think back to what 2020 was like in the future, no one is going to say, oh, 2020, that was just so boring.
No, for sure.
From the very beginning of the year to now and ongoingly, what we have seen is the embodiment of what else I love to say is that man plans and God laughs. I'm sure that no one at the start of the year, when you were making your New Year's resolutions and making your year-long plans and vision, no one could have foreseen, let's see, a pandemic. No one could have foreseen a lockdown. No one could have foreseen
a 2-week lockdown.
Oh, right, yeah. The 2-week lockdown in March,
right.
2 weeks to bend the curve.
Yeah, to bend
that became 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That became 90 days. That became, and lo and behold, right now, here we sit as we're recording this, and we're in the middle of November,
yeah.
And through reported spikes in the pandemic rate all over the country and all over the world, we are being locked down again. Now, to the point about how it contributes to our evolution, let's just take a look at some of the innovations that have been prompted by these challenges. Business is having to evolve to deal with the pandemic, and the very format that we're doing these videos on is in itself one of the beneficiaries of the challenge of the pandemic. Anyone who's been following the stock market for stocks such as Zoom, if you bought it right, which was any time at the beginning of the year,
yeah,
you've seen unprecedented growth in the value of the stock.
Right.
Anyone who has little kids, the challenge has been that when they close down the schools, the parents have had to cultivate their abilities not only to parent, but to teach their kids. And this has had both benefits and drawbacks. And that's another point, just to clarify, is that the reason for the evolution is because everything that happens has mixed benefits and drawbacks. And when it happens the way we think it's supposed to happen, the way we like it to happen, the way we're comfortable with it happening, we self-determine and label those things as good. And when it happens, not the way we planned for, not the way we're comfortable with, not the way that we had been preparing for, we say that's bad.
Right.
However, over time, what you get to see is that there is no good without a corresponding bad. There is no challenge without a corresponding benefit. And so, several of my client companies, because of the shift from brick and mortar work to working in the virtual space, they've had to cultivate new methods of communicating within the workforce. They've had to cultivate new methods of interpersonal communication. They've had to cultivate new methods for doing business, even something like the restaurant business. The lockdown obviously created challenges. The more flexible and adaptable the managers and owners of the restaurants were and are, the more easy and able to adapt they were and are, the more they were able to reinvent themselves. So restaurants started to do delivery. Restaurants started to serve outdoors. Restaurants started to reconfigure the very form of the restaurant and built covered outdoor eating areas. Restaurants took the parking garages and parking spaces for the restaurants and flipped the switch and turned the parking spaces into outside eateries.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So is that explaining the support and challenge, the chaos and order? So it's kind of like, I think you showed a little bit, it's a pendulum swinging. It swings one way and then it's going to swing the other way. And the point is to get it to center, but we're always somehow swinging the pendulum.
The point is that like a pendulum, it will tend to center itself over the passage of time. The energy that creates the challenge can't be sustained at a high level of flux. It just can't, because the energy itself begins to dissipate. It's called attenuation. The magnitude of the fluctuation begins to diminish over time. We say, and what it feels like to us is, we get used to it. But in the flow of energy, what really is happening is that the impetus that created the fluctuation, energy can't be created or destroyed. It just changes form. And so what begins as the impetus to make the change then becomes ritualized over time. And so the magnitude of the change starts to diminish as what was new and novel becomes part of a ritual. And as it becomes a ritual and it becomes habituated, if you had faith that it was going to happen that way and that you could persevere and get through it, it becomes for you a spiritual ritual that then only serves to reinforce your certainty that it's going to be okay. And so the challenge for us all is to remember that regardless of the circumstances, the system, the universe that was here before us and will be here after us, even though in our moments of perception, we may have we'll just call it a freak out and think that this is the end of the world as we know it.
Right.
Every great culture, every great society, every great civilization has had a beginning, a middle, and an end point for that civilization. If you read from the time of Socrates, the elders at the time of Socrates were worried about the young people and how the young people didn't pay attention to things and how the young people didn't follow through and how the young people didn't have any values, and surely that this was going to become the end of the world as they knew it. And so on from Rome, and so on from Greece, and so on and so on. The historic lifespan of a governmental system thus far on planet Earth has rarely exceeded 200 years. 1776, we're now in 2020, we are at the end of the run for the way that it has been. And you can hear it in people's commentary, and you can see it in how the political parties are starting to fray at their limits.
Right. Well, that leads me into my next question. I wanted to ask you regarding this pendulum, regarding this staying at point where it's bringing us to a certain order, right? This chaos and this order, it's bringing us to where it's supposed to be, a self-correcting system in a sense, right? It's kind of how I understand it. In a political arena where both sides, partly due to algorithms and our social medias, and we're getting misinformation, agendas, bipartisan cheerleaders on both ends, retractions on both sides of political arenas. One day it's true, then the next day the next party debunks that's truth. You know, everyone right now we're in a political spectrum right here. So I'm coming from this thing if you're hearing this later or before or in a long time from now. But everyone is screaming right now, show me the proof. So we as human beings, I don't think we're made for this kind of input aphasia now. And how do we cope with this, or as you say, become trigger proof in the midst of this maximum evolution?
Power of your discipline, the power of your rituals, the power of becoming. There are two forms of control of yourself and your life that can be operating. You can have an internal locus of control and an external locus of control. An external locus of control is when your state of self is situation determined. So again, as I was saying before, when it happens the way that you like it, you feel good about that. And when it doesn't happen the way that you like it, you feel bad about it. And as a result of that, you surrender your control to the situation, which is very exhausting and creates the fluctuations of the tick-tock of the pendulum. Eventually, either by inspiration, by wisdom, by habituation, or by exhaustion, you begin to say and do and shift to an internal locus of control, wherein instead of letting what happens outside of you determine that, you go with what's happening within you. And when you go internal locus of control, your sense of power and empowerment gets restored. Instead of being reactive to the situations and circumstances, you get to be able to become proactive. Your sense goes from being powerless over the situation to being powerful within how you respond to the situations. You get to do that in phases. In the beginning, excuse me a second, this is practiced by acting better than you feel.
Right.
This is accomplished by breath work. This is accomplished by seeing the big picture. This is accomplished by not letting how you feel, not letting how you respond be determined by what's going on out there. And the more care you take of yourself from, like I said, breath work, prayer, meditation, exercise, eating healthy food, etc., you cultivate a sense of resilience. And as the resilience becomes more habituated in your neurology, that's how you become trigger proof. Your habits, your rituals, your neurology becomes able to withstand whatever is happening on the outside. And eventually, when you become enlightened, you get to the moment of awareness that there's nothing really going on. That this out here is truly an illusion. And if you buy into that illusion and you give it power over you and you make it real, well, then you must react a certain way to it. That's when the inner voice will say things like, I have to do something.
Right.
Surely I have to do something. Well, the truth about the universe is it does not require you to do anything. In fact, one of the takeaway benefits of cultivating the practice of meditation is you get to have the awareness during meditation that you not only don't need to do anything, the more successful, whatever that means to you, your meditation becomes, the less subject your mind becomes to what's happening on the outside. So you get to cultivate the ability to just be. And as you cultivate that ability to just be, the period of time between the stimulus and your response gets longer. And as that period of time gets longer, you get to have the experience of being more empowered, less feeling compelled to have to do something. When you discover that you didn't need to do anything, that the system, the universe, is perfectly self-correcting, then the fluctuation starts to diminish. As the situation and the fluctuation diminishes, the energy dissipates, order is restored. Only the new order that is resultant is at a higher level of evolution. So you sense and see, if you think it through this way and can see it this way, you can then get to observe that evolution occurs during the process of going from maximum support to maximum challenge to less support to less challenge to equilibrium. And that's literally the cycle that has been going on from time immemorial. In the studies they're doing on the whole nature of the quantum universe, they're now able to measure and see that the particle wave fluctuation, where energy exists and gets perceived and measured either as a particle or a wave, and how it gets done that way is based on the mindset and belief system of the observer. In this case, it's you. So if you practice being trigger proof, not only do you get to experience what it is to be trigger proof, but what you attract into your life are less triggers. It is as if what you attract, as John says, what you think about and think about, you bring about. So that as you become less trigger proof and it feels good to you, you then attract more situations that no longer trigger you. You then get to have the experience of mastery, which then allows you to evolve and go on and practice and cultivate that with whatever comes next.
Well, that brings me to my next thing. In my experience of coaching with you, and so many of my old ways were no longer serving me, and over, and you kept reading, and you can read it in my book as well. In an experience of the book we wrote together, is that you constantly reminded me of that, like, maximum, everything that happened, like, hey, so-and-so and this, and you're like, maximum evolution. You kept, happens at the border of chaos and order. And I think one of the biggest things with that was, it was letting go. I was letting go so hard to all these old ways, and the pendulum wanted to keep swinging this way. And you kept repeating it over. Maximum evolution occurs at the border of chaos and order. And, it's just so engraved in me.
Flies in the face of the way the child in us all who lacks impulse control feels compelled to do something, to respond in some way when it appears as though the old order is breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just wait, the one thing that's constant is time. What then happens is you evolved. You became you 2.0. In your goodest life, the whole idea at the end of the program is that who you leave as at the end of the transformation is you 2.0. And what drives people to desire the experience is that something happens in everyone's life where they feel stuck. The stuckness is the feeling of trying compulsively to manage and control this whole external world. And since you can't, because we are essentially powerless over it, the harder you try to control it, the more it pushes back. And what that feels like is stuckness. And all anybody wants to be able to do when they feel stuck is they want to be able to change. And so, as simple and contrary as it sounds, the solution is to let go. Except that when your neurology and your fear-based perceptions are telling you that to let go is to die, to let go is to lose control, It's the most, that's the doing nothing. That's the most difficult something for a human being to possibly do, is to learn how to trust the process and know that the universe was here before we got here. It'll be here after we're gone. Really, all you're experiencing is a moment in space-time, and the solution to it is really just to trust the process and let go. To, if you will, to win, because that's what we all want to do. What do I need to do to win? Surrender. There's a misconception and a misperception for people when you tell them that they have to surrender. They hear and think that what you're suggesting is that they give up. But if you look up give up in the dictionary or Google it, and you Google surrender, you'll get to see that they're not the same at all. Giving up implies something about the position that you're holding. Surrendering implies letting go. When you surrender and you stop resisting, you then get to go with the flow. And as you go with the flow, the new order that really was in the process of establishing itself anyway takes you along with it, like being in the ocean, like a good surfer or body surfer goes out into the ocean and waits for the perfect wave. And when the perfect wave comes, what the surfer does is ride the wave in the direction that the wave is going. And when he or she can really go with that flow, they have an extraordinary experience. And that's just the way it is with life. When you go with the flow, so that at the end of the day, on reflection, which is one of the other tools that we teach, that at the end of the day, you get to reflect upon the day. And the real big questions are, what'd you learn? What worked? Which typically means what worked is what turned out the way I wanted it to. What didn't work, which typically means what didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. And what could I have done differently? And in the what could I have done differently, as you evolve, what you could have done differently overwhelmingly becomes surrender. Go with the flow. Surrender to win, because, just to bring this to a whole, maximum evolution, which is all what we're here to do, it occurs at the borders of support and challenge. When you feel maximally challenged and you surrender, you discover the support that the hidden order was bringing forth every time.
But we are in a constant battle against like a hustle society of all these gurus coming out, all these people just showing you, there's like a disconnect when you say those things, and then discipline shall set you free, right? And these certain things. So we're putting like, all right, go with the flow, but have a discipline. Go with is that to me is like, you did all the steps of riding that wave. You knew how to balance yourself, put your arms out correctly, do it like you trusted the process. You learned this skill set, and you took the wave, and it took you on a beautiful ride. Right? That's where we're at. That's what the patience comes. That's what the self-correcting thing comes into oneness of. Just knowing at that perfect moment you prepared for it and you rode the wave.
Right. And then, because it's all about acknowledgement.
Right.
Nothing without acknowledgement. So in your tribe, or at least within yourself, I always encourage people after a job well done to give themselves an attaboy or attagirl for a job well done. You kept your word to yourself. You persevered when you weren't sure you would. Despite your fears to the contrary, everything turned out perfectly.
Really does. A nice little symphony. Even though you think there's major disruptions, they're just so needed, because if without these disruptions, a lot of us would never move forward without it. So, or out of the rut that we were in. So it's a beautiful thing to see this thing self-correcting. Well, we'll leave it at that. Hope we gave a good definition of a maximum evolution occurring.
Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy your chaos and enjoy your order. Well, thank you. Have a good day. And hope you enjoyed this. Share this. Check out also our book on Amazon, Fridays with Goodman. You can get a bunch of tactics and stuff information. Below, you'll see all this stuff on goodmanfactor.com. You can get like a 15 or 20 minute talk with you if you go to goodmanfactor.com to talk to Dr. Larry Goodman and get a consultation.
And be on the lookout. We're about to launch Your Goodest Life as a virtual experience where the things that we're talking about on these podcasts, you will be able to experience firsthand.
For sure. Goodmanfactor.com, and that'll be yourgoodestlife.com. And that should be out already or coming soon. Talk to you later. Take care, everybody.